The seat of Flynn, named after the Reverend John Flynn, founder of the Royal Flying Doctor Service. And that's a fitting name for a seat that relies on that service. This is the 8th biggest electorate in the country. Taking in Emerald and surrounding towns in the west, all the way to Gladstone on the coast, stretching north to the outskirts of Rockhampton and south to Bundaberg. And this is one of the electorates that's most directly connected to coal. 7.2% of people over 15 in Flynn work in the coal mining industry. This one seat is home to more than a tenth of all Australians who work in coal mining. No surprises then that the candidates for both major parties want to be seen supporting the industry.
Labor backs the coal industry, Labor backs the LNG industry, and no one backs it more than I do right here in central Queensland.
This is the real stuff. This is what is paying for our education, our health and emergency services. It is underpinning the economy of Australia.
The next biggest industry in the seat is beef cattle farming, employing more than 5% of people in the electorate. Last election, Labor's vote was strong in Gladstone and the Aboriginal community of Woorabinda, plus a handful of other booths. But the LNP won most of the vote outside the seat's biggest city. The LNP holds it on an 8.7% margin, and it's one of Labor's targets in regional Queensland. The other party to watch is One Nation. In 2019, it got its second highest primary vote in the nation in Flynn.
So this is clearly a part of Australia that is heavily reliant on the resources sector. Let's get to our first question on this, and it comes from Carol Holden.
Good evening. The major parties seem to me to be pussyfooting around the idea of transition to a clean energy economy, with candidates from both sides of politics talking up their support for coal and coal mines. It looks to me as though this is because no one has the faintest idea of how to go about a fair and viable transition. Now, Germany, for example, is now using 50% renewables with a goal of 100% by 2035. Transition can be done with intelligent planning and goodwill and cooperation of the major stakeholders, such as the unions, big business, government and the communities. Why can't we do something like this at a federal level in Australia?
Carol, thank you for the question. Amanda, I want to come to you first. This is what you do. Yep. What does a just and viable transition, in Carol's words, look like in a place like Gladstone?
Yeah, well, the first thing is we might not be seeing that leadership at a federal level, but the good news is local governments all over Australia in coal regions are taking the reins on this because they're seeing change now. Like, it is here. It's not something down the track that's inevitable. We're seeing, mines that have been approved but not funded. We're seeing early closures of power plants. So this is really affecting communities. So we go where we're invited, and we're invited by coal communities at the moment in the Hunter and Latrobe Valley and Central Queensland. Because people are saying, what do we do about this? How do we manage it? And we know what to do to manage it. We actually have the answers. You need to use the time you've got to diversify your regional base, your economy. You need to look after workers. And there's some really good examples where if you can start thinking about this in the long term, you've got time to train, to develop skills for the new industries, to redeploy workers, which they've done in Latrobe Valley. So, we know what we need to do to support workers. But the biggest question is, how do you diversify those regional economies? Gladstone's a really great example because they're getting in early, and there's so many opportunities here that people are starting to explore. So it's not just the renewable energy that's being built, it's what we could do with that renewable energy. So it's things like green hydrogen, it's manufacturing renewable energy parts, it's looking at land use differently. And this is what's happening all over Australia. This is actually happening, industry's investing in it. The problem is we've just had a federal government sort of missing in action and actually helping regions to get on with it.
Bronwyn, I want to hear from you on this as well. Mm-hmm. What are you looking for? What needs to happen when we talk about transition?
Well, we've got to look at training and education, just like Amanda said, in regards to what communities get from that. So if you move things out and putting something else in, what happens in that process of training, education, vet training. I know here locally there's a university, a regional university, and a shout out to CQ University tonight, who has vet programs, who is focused on training tradespeople and focused on, upskilling and training. The issue then for them is also about getting training teachers or teachers to teach tradespeople. We know that in the trades industry, the average ages are in the 50s. So that's becoming an increasing problem for us. I think it's also people would be remiss if they didn't understand that people in mining, and my own partner works in mining.
I think he's here tonight.
He's here this evening, and family members are engaged in mining. It would be wrong for people to assume that people in the industry aren't also looking at what solutions are. They certainly are. There are
They're
mining
the ones
families
asking us to come.
Yeah, they are right. That's right, Amanda. There's communities seeking answers and know that it can't happen forever. And they see the impacts of mining, but also know that there has to be a process to move from what's happening now to the renewables. And there has to be an investment then to do the things that Amanda explained. There needs to be investment in that infrastructure, in research, in training, in order for that to happen.
Bob?
I'm also, hang on a minute, I'm also with the University of Queensland, that there is the Sustainable Mining Institute that is very engaged with communities, traditional owner groups, around what's happening in mining and land reforesting and revegetation, from mine closures to managing land bases in the best way possible. But that also needs to happen. If communities want to move to the next phase, then it needs to be a whole phased approach and planned and developed approach. And in that, Indigenous peoples need to be engaged in that process from get-go, from the beginning to end, and sitting at the table. Mining companies and resource companies, and this also goes with government, you can't keep doing acknowledgements to country and welcomes to country and having Aboriginal art on the boardrooms, on the walls, wearing Aboriginal art in logos and in uniforms, and then not engaging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the very rooms that are making decisions, whether it's about shutdown, whether it's about shutdowns or whether it's about planning and whether it's about the new developments, new industries.
Bronwyn, thank you. And just coming back to Carol's question about transition, and I suspect amongst the three politicians here we might get some different views to what we've just heard. Bob Caddy, shaking your head at words like diversifying and transition. Why?
David, and everyone here listen to me, please. This country exports $350 billion a year of product. Almost all of that is just from two products, coal and iron ore. They account for $250 billion of that $350 billion. Now, you take out coal, you bankrupt this country. You bankrupt this country. This was a little service station. Gladstone was a little service station on the highway. It is now 60,000 people, one of the richest cities in Australia and one of the richest cities on earth. And I was a party of the government that created this city. We created this city.
But Bob, can you hold back the tide here?
Please listen, let me finish, David. I'm finishing, right? If you want to pull those pillars down, then my brothers in the CFMEU will stand up and we'll fight you. You're taking our jobs away and sending them to China. Congratulations to you. Congratulations to you. Okay. A wonderful victory for you.
Bob,
you've created jobs, yes, in China.
Bob, I just need to ask though, can government actually stop this change coming? Can the tide be held back if this is where the world is moving?
David, I don't know why people don't research issues. I mean, one of the greatest breakthroughs in Australia recently, well, you're laughing, I'll bet you have not read the report by the university that did the studies on algae. You can take all of the CO2 from a coal-fired power station and have it absorbed by algae in ponds. And on the figures, and they won the United Nations Prize for the Environment.
Well, I haven't read that research.
The people that did the study.
But it's clear
they won the United Nations Prize for the Environment. You can take all of the emissions from a coal-fired power station, grow algae and make more money off the algae than you will off the electricity with
problem-
zero emissions.
Well, we've got
zero
okay.
emissions.
We've got
There
a
is a
few
challenge.
questions along these
United
lines that I want to get
Nations
through.
Prize for Environment
Okay.
for Australia.
Hold your
The
fire
resources
for a minute.
minister might want to add something as well, David.
We do have a few questions along these lines I want to get to. Matthew Graving's got the next one. Matthew.
Thanks, David. I've diesel